Hello once again, everyone, and welcome to the 28th episode of the DrunkFriend podcast. As always, we're your host. I'm Travis, way out here in Virginia. That's Alex, way out there in sunny Albuquerque. How are things going over there, Alex? I always have to give the feed update, and this time you were in there. I scrolled through. There was some SNES drunk. You're back.
Yeah, but it's sports game stuff, so not really. Because a lot of people don't care about sports games, but I don't care. Yeah, it's Overpowered Video Game Athletes 16-bit edition part 2, featuring such luminaries as Air All Night in David Robinson's Supreme Court. The guy cannot miss. You can shoot threes all day with that guy. He won't miss.
And his name is Air All Night?
Yes.
And it feels like he'd be shooting air balls all night. That seems misleading.
Nice. Yeah, as long as you're right up next to the 3-point line, you can't miss with that guy. I had a very nice 69 points at the half.
That is
with
nice.
That guy. Yeah. And and there's other stuff too. Of course, there's Bo Jackson this time in a college football game. There's all sorts of other stuff that nobody listening cares about because it's sports stuff.
Ah, come on. We did a whole sports podcast one time. People are into it. They'll suffer through it.
Yeah, they nearly canceled us. But coming up tomorrow being Thursday, we're recording this on a Wednesday, it will be an N64 game, F-Zero X.
Ooh.
And I really enjoyed that one because of the track randomizer, and that one is very, very cool. It makes it like F-Zero meets like Excitebike almost, because remember Excitebike, you can like build your own track basically, and F-Zero X isn't quite like that, but it's got the same kind of spirit, I guess, which is really awesome. Also,
I was always impressed with that game because for an N64 game where you're racing, it feels pretty fast.
Yeah, it's the only 60 frames per second N64 game.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it looks fast and I can feel the speed of my vehicle.
It also doesn't have that ridiculous gray fog as much as other N64 games.
Mm-hmm.
As they do a nice job with that too. It's just a really well-made game, and I think it's just as, it's still worth playing today, just as much as the original and as much as GX is for GameCube. So I thought that was interesting. It's like, hey, it's an N64 game I actually like.
Nice. Speaking of sports games, at least yours is about things that are like crazy. Like these athletes will break your system. But I just did bowling games on the NES. And,
and that's 2 of them, right?
Well, there are 2 in my video, but it turns out first comment I got this morning was, hey, you didn't do Dynamite Bowl on the Famicom. And I was like, I'm going to get canceled, aren't I?
The executives are going to come in. They're going to pull the plug. You can't be...
But no, it's fair.
I mean, is that game any good, though? This Famicom game? I mean, is it worth talking about?
I literally don't know. I thought I had... The thing was, it was kind of my fault, because I named the video bowling games on the Famicom and NES, because I thought I wasn't going to just do one on Championship Bowling. Nah. But I was like, hey, Perfect Bowling's kind of interesting. It's got a futuristic feel. It's got weird parts to it. It's like, I'll lump those both together and say, hey, bowling games on the Famicom and the NES. So I kind of made it seem like these are the ones.
Yeah.
Dynamite Bowl's out here hanging out. Huge contingent of Dynamite Bowl fans are now upset. So now, what am I going to do? So I've apologized profusely. I took the podium earlier this morning, had my family around, and we'll get through it.
Press conference. You got Chuck Todd asking you questions, and grilling it.
Yeah, he's relentless.
Yeah, it's. Are you allowed to say what you've got coming up next?
Yeah, why not? I don't know. Maybe. I do put them on Patreon. I will say, though, October, my favorite time of year. I always do. Normally, I randomize everything, but for October, I specifically go for the games that got a little bit of spook to them. I like them to be a little spooky, maybe based on a licensed scary movie, maybe a couple like that, So those are the ones that I get really excited to make. Unfortunately, the ones I did last year didn't get a whole lot of attention, but I just love those types of games and just that theme. I love 80s horror, 80s schlocky horror, all those tropes, and put it in a video game, it's all the better. So that's what I got coming up, is a lot of games like that.
Is it Beetlejuice? Do you have Beetlejuice coming up?
No, I don't have.
Okay.
I don't have Beetlejuice.
That's good, because that game is it's not good. But
no,
yeah.
I know.
That's good then, because I have a that's a sore spot for me, that game. So that's good to hear. No Beetlejuice on the way.
No Beetlejuice on the way this year, maybe next year. Now, I do know I have the privilege of having met the world record speedrunner. Speaking of speedruns, you'll want to stick around after Alex and I get out of the way, but I do know the world record holder for that game. His name is Chris, Bass Guy 654. He competed in the Big NES 20 there last week, or a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, big Beetlejuice runner. So I know the top brass for that game, buddy.
Well, tragically, Beetlejuice was somehow not part of the NES 20. Yeah. A huge oversight, obviously, but maybe they'll fix that next year.
I hope so. They really need to.
So we got some emails here. First, we've got another one from Jono, and he says, it's another one from Jono, I should say. Hey, Drunk Friends, really enjoyed the newest episode with Brian and Jim. Even if listening to people talk about beers at 7 a.m. when I need to make breakfast for my kids was some sort of cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, I am Australian, but 7 a.m. is probably a tad early to crack one open. Nah.
Maybe.
Anyway, just wanted to ask you guys about what your most formative gaming experiences are. And he says that he has two, and they both involve his dad. The first one was the first time I remember him actually playing a game with me, which was WCW versus NWO World Tour on the N64. And the second memory he has, he says, was a year ago when he came to visit, and we sat out in my garage playing Combat on the Atari 2600, which he soundly flogged me at, which is very cool. Both great times and good memories. Well, that's about it. Have a great weekend, Jono. Yeah, that's really cool. Like, your dad comes out, and first thing you want to do, let's play some Combat on Atari 2600. That's great. I love it. What are yours?
Yeah, I like that his dad just beat his ass at that game, though. That makes me happy. I like it. I like when, some dads just have that Atari power, man. They just know how to do it. But, I don't know about formative gaming experiences, but he did remind me of playing games with my dad. And I think formatively, maybe, coming downstairs on a Saturday morning to play the Nintendo. And my parents were a little older when they had me. They were in their 40s. So we're talking, these are folks born in the 40s playing a Nintendo in the 80s. So I mean, it's a generational weirdness in a weird way. And I remember coming downstairs excited to play my Nintendo on a number of occasions and having to get my mom to kick my dad off of it because he wouldn't stop playing Dr. Mario. And that's still, I still thought it was cool because I liked that my dad and I played the same thing. But at some point I was like, but Dad, I want to play something. And he was just killing, level 19, just
nice.
Putting the pills in the bottle. Yeah, he was really good at it. He was good at Mario. I think with the first week we owned a Nintendo, he actually beat it. And I didn't beat it for years after that. So he was a fun one to watch. And definitely, it wasn't like a contentious thing. I didn't have to arm wrestle my dad for the Nintendo. But it was always cool that he was interested in that, given that his peers were not into anything like that at all. It made my dad cool to me. So made gaming cool too.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. Wow. So your dad actually beat Mario World, the first Mario within the first week.
Yeah, it was insane.
Is he going to work and play in this or something? Or
I don't know. One thing I do remember him doing was he found on his own, there's no internet. This is 89, 90. He found the way that you could like jump on Mario on a certain stair and get like continue jumping and get all the 1-ups.
Yeah,
he just figured that out one day. He was like, "Yeah, I knew like if you hit him, you get the points. But if I could just trap him on a step, I could get a whole bunch of he would call them men. I get a whole bunch of men." And then he just did that, and then I would have to get him to do it for me to give me a chance of making it through the game. I'd be like, "All right, Dad, I'm here. Will you get me all the 1-ups so I can see the end?" So yeah, he would help me cheat. He was my dealer.
One of these days, somebody needs to make a documentary or at least like a YouTube video about all the different ways people describe extra lives and free guys and men and all that stuff, because it's different everywhere you go. I love it.
It sure is. Yeah,
it's funny as hell. And for my formative stuff, it's stuff I've talked about before. Really, it's I remember watching my older sister play Adventure for Atari 2600, and it freaked me out that the dragon could follow you between screens and all the way through until you freaking kill it with the arrow thing. That really blew my mind, and it really scared me. I was a very easily scared kid. And then there's, of course, when we got the Super Nintendo and, I'm playing Mario World in my own house for the first, it just I couldn't believe it. And, all that sort of stuff. And then another one I don't think I've mentioned is watching my brother and his friend play Secret of Mana for the first time. And just the music and like the colors in that game were so like bright and vivid and just different than any other SNES game at that time. So those are what stand out to me. And I still feel personally attacked when somebody goes after Secret of Mana, even if it is justified. But because that game has plenty of flaws. But I really have fond memories of that game.
Cool. Yeah, I like it too, actually. Okay, our next email is from friend Burger Champ. He says, "Hey guys, it's Burger Champ. On your respective systems, NES and SNES, what licensed game that you've played has the biggest gap in quality between the game and its source material, and which ones evoke the spirit of the source material more closely, or most closely?"
Well, I know which one has the biggest gap between just a single aspect of the game and the source material, and that's, of course, going to be Waterworld and the soundtrack versus Waterworld the movie. The game is not good, but as far as evoke the spirit of the source material more closely, or most closely, I guess, I always think of the Batman games. Batman Returns is pretty good. I thought Adventures of Batman and Robin on Super Nintendo did a really, really, really nice job capturing that art style of the animated series. Even though it's not really based on the animated series, it still evokes that spirit, I guess. Batman Returns at least has shots of the movie. It does a nice job following the movie. I don't know if that's important to anybody, but it does do a good job of following the movie at least.
Nice. Yeah, I was actually going to say Batman for the NES, for a game that captures the source material pretty closely. It tries to follow the movie a little bit, and it's actually a pretty good game. It's called Batman the video game, but it's based on Batman the movie, so it's kind of confusing, but I like that one a lot. As for the biggest gap in quality, you could maybe argue Conan. That's a bad NES game.
Rambo,
yeah, it's at least a decent game. It's not that, I mean, I say decent, like it's not great, but it makes Conan look,
Conan's freaking broken, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's basically just a broken game.
I would also argue Back to the Future has a pretty big gap between what's going on in the movie and what's going on in that game.
Yeah, it's nothing of what I've never actually played that game. I only know it from the Angry Video Game video, and it's so like what's the scene where he's like dodging clocks or something like that? It's like, come on, you can't come up with something better than that. It's ridiculous. I think you have more material to work with for this subject than I do. That's for dang sure. Because I'm trying to think like action movies. I think for biggest gap, I think Last Action Hero is up there, but that's only because I love that movie. And that game it's just a beat 'em up, and it's boring, and it's not well made, and yeah. It's just
one you like is True Lies, though, right? That's a big one.
True Lies is excellent. Yeah, True Lies is a great movie, and it's a really good game. It might be my pick for the second best licensed game on the Super Nintendo after Turtles in Time, of course. But
right on.
Yeah, right on.
All right, coming up next is our guest, Summoning Salt.
Yeah, that's right. Me and Trav are like the opening band that everyone wants to see get off stage. Like we're opening for Iron Maiden, and the entire crowd is booing us. It's like, Maiden, we want to see Maiden. Where's Summoning Salt?
Well, let's give them their Maiden. Now, I would describe what Summoning Salt does on YouTube as ESPN 30 for 30s, but on speedrunning. And his channel has blown up over the last little while at over 800,000 subscribers, so stick around after this cooler break. All right, Summoning Salt, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. It was kind of short notice, but we really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad I saw that Twitter message or whatever it was. It was kind of a fluke that I ended up seeing it, but yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I want to give a shout out to user Based Paperclip, which is an interesting name in and of itself, for shooting that shot for us, because you're definitely a guest that's been on our list for some time. So we're happy that all worked out.
Yeah, cool. Glad to be here. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Before, just in case there's some folks out there that aren't really familiar with you or your channel, how would you describe Summoning Salt?
Well, my channel is kind of this weird niche in the corner of YouTube that nobody would think to look for unless they heard about it from someone else. But what I do is I make videos that talk about the world record history of different video games. People do these things called speed runs that you might have heard of before. It's the act of completing a video game as fast as you humanly can. And the fastest person, has the world record. And I'm kind of tracking in a video how that record has gotten lower over a number of years and what strategies were used and who did it, and kind of talking about the whole story behind it.
So when it comes to these videos that you're making, today alone, I watched like the Contra one, the Ninja Gaiden one, which I'd seen before, and the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out one. And they're all like close to an hour long. I think the question most people would like to know is just like how much work goes into these videos, because you're just watching tons of footage, not just world record runs either. I mean, you're digging into forums from like the early 2000s. Do you do all this work on your own, or how does it work from a editing and a creation standpoint?
Yeah, so typically you're seeing about like 2 to 3 months between upload times. I'll wait 2 or 3 months to upload the video, and it's not like I take a month and a half off and then I work on it for 2 weeks and then upload it. I'm working pretty much that whole time on the video. And I do it alone. I don't really have anyone else helping. Well, I shouldn't say I do it alone, because I contact people in the community for every single video that I make, and they help me out with research. And usually they're, really happy to help, because they want to see the video made on their game, because they're just interested to see how it's going to turn out and everything. But, I don't have any other video editors. I don't have anyone out there doing research for me. I do it all myself.
No intern?
Wow. Nope, nothing. It's just me. So, yeah, I mean, I've thought about it, though. I've thought about just like hiring someone to do the dirty work that I don't want to do, like putting together,
it's a grind.
The little details. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's days when it's like the most fun thing ever, like when I'm able to get really creative and edit, just kind of explore what I want to do. But then there's days where it's like, okay, now I need to record the section of the video where I explain what spread rhythm is in Contra and figure out how I explain this. It's like, dude, okay, I have to sit through a tutorial for a couple hours and understand how everything in the game works. And it's rewarding, but it's not always the most exciting and motivating thing.
You got to tap into your technical writing skills there, where you have to kind of be a little, you can't be too dry. But I think you do a good job of that, though, where you're able to phrase things in a very efficient way that helps get across the point of what something like what you mentioned in Contra is. What's, and then in addition to that, you've got like, yeah, he's hitting the button 16 times per second. I think it was DK.
Yeah, DK 28.
It's like, my God, man, we're getting some serious detail here. It's freaking great.
Yeah, there's like little skills that I've kind of picked up on when making these videos over the years, and it's an odd combination, because it's like I need to, I don't think I'm a great writer, but I've gotten good enough at the type of writing that I need to do where I'm at least proficient at it. So I need a very specific subset of writing skills, and I need to know how to video edit, and I need to know how to understand technical aspects of games. And I need to understand how to mix music with lining it up with video and making it sound good. So it's a weird subset of skills that I've kind of needed to develop. But, over the years, I've kind of gotten to where I'm comfortable with it. So
Yeah, you do a great job, and you've touched on a bunch of things here that I want to ask you about. It kind of opened up my segue radar, almost just tapped out because I was like, yeah, I want to talk about that. But I'll stop at one thing. Alex mentioned the presses per second and stuff like that, because there's a lot of that stuff in your videos where it seems to me that you're the one that's doing the research and saying, okay, well, this is why this guy lost a few seconds and this guy was able to surpass him. Guy or gal, whatever. And is that something that's already kind of known in the community, or is that the stuff that you're watching videos and you're saying, oh, okay, well, there's where he lost time, and you're sort of the source of that information at that point?
Well, it depends on. It depends. It changes from game to game, and it also changes from trick to trick in the individual games. There's a lot of it, especially nowadays, where I'm having to watch almost every single world record run and just compare them and take notes on where they saved time, where they lost time, what the new strategies were. I could show you guys after the podcast. I have this document that I used for Contra for making the video, and I don't remember how many pages long it is. It's probably 15 or 20 pages in the Google document. It's just listing differences between each of the 30-something Contra records.
That's insane.
And, some of that stuff I kind of got a head start on because I talked with the record holder, Angry Links, and he was able to kind of guide me through the first couple runs and be like, okay, here's the type of stuff I'm looking for. This is where he saved time here. This is where he lost time here. You should look at his spread rhythm, check out how the flame patterns are in energy zone, things like that. So, but yeah, once I get going into the video, I just need to get good at looking for where they gain time and lost time and comparing it. And it's a big grind. It's tough, but like I said, there's some days that I really like doing it, and there's some days where it's like, okay, I'm watching the 14th record in Contra, comparing it to the 13th, and it's a 15th of a second faster. There's really not that much that I need to look for here, but I should probably check anyway. So it's tough.
Right. Well, speaking of pages of documents, are you scripting your voiceover, or do you just have bullet points, or are you writing out everything and reading it?
Yeah, so I have that like 15 or 20 page document with research, and then I have to turn all of that research into probably about a 10 to 15 page script.
Wow.
And so everything I say I have written out ahead of time. The way I usually do it is I'll get all of the research done ahead of time. I'll get that whole document done, and then I'll write maybe a page or so of the script, and then I'll record my voice for it and edit it. And then I'll move on to the next page, write that out, edit it, and I'll keep going until I'm all the way through the whole script and done with the video.
Jeez. And it seems to me like, your videos are getting better and better. They've always been great. And to an extent, they're growing in length as well. So it seems like there's sort of this progression. Maybe someone will do a summoning salt progression where they'll just look at your videos, but they get a little longer, they get a little more detailed, but it always remains interesting. And I'm curious, looking back, are there any particular videos that you've made that stick out as being the hardest to put together for whatever reason?
Well, what you mentioned about my videos growing in length, my early ones versus my newest ones, my early videos, like, I'm probably kind of biased, but my early videos kind of suck. Like, if I'm being honest, like, the level of research that I did for, like, Mario 64 120 star, which was my third video, I mean, I got so much stuff wrong in that video, and the whole thing is like 20 minutes long when it probably should have been more like 2 hours long. So, the level of research that I did for back then, even though there were tough topics that I didn't know much about, it was really lacking. But so you're asking about like which one's the hardest to research? If I had done the proper research that I should have done back in like 2017, one of those videos probably would have been the hardest, just because there's a lot of games I used to do back then. I don't know much about the history, like Mario 64 120 star. If I was to do that again today, I would need to research it extensively and learn so much about how the game works and everything. So nowadays, I'm typically staying more toward area that I'm more familiar with, like Punch-Out, Contra, and Ninja Gaiden. So it's kind of a hard question to answer. Which was the hardest to research? The stuff like Pokemon. I've never even played Pokemon. I know it's a popular speedrun. I know everyone loves it, but sad confession, I've never actually played it. So doing research for a game like that, even though back when I made it, I wasn't necessarily going as in depth as I should have, it was still a pretty massive undertaking for the time just because of my extreme lack of knowledge.
Gotcha.
Dude, you're not alone. I've barely spent any time with Pokemon. It seems like just a regular old, turn-based RPG to me with, collecting stuff.
Have you played Zelda? Any of the Zelda games?
Yeah, plenty. You have not.
So
wow.
That's another one. And if you notice, I've made like 10 or 15 Super Mario videos, but I've made exactly one Zelda video. So that's kind of a sign that I haven't played very much.
Well, that brings me to, you mentioned the games that you're comfortable with are all NES games, it sounds like. Do you plan on sticking with NES stuff for the future? Any Super Nintendo by any chance? Any Sega Genesis? Anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to exclusively do NES games, and I haven't. Like my second most recent video was about Wii Golf.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, which I really enjoyed. Yeah.
So I'm a little more inclined to do retro NES type of stuff, just because that's what I'm. Not necessarily my background, partially my background, but also partially just like. It's what I've the stuff I've speed ran has been mainly classic Nintendo games. So my general level of knowledge is fairly high compared to other stuff, but I'm not going to roll out doing Super Nintendo, N64, or even more modern than that, like GameCube, Wii, anything like that. I'm not ruling anything out.
It does seem like that NES, just for whatever reason, it's almost like a happy accident, as Bob Ross would say, that those games, so many of those games ended up lending themselves so well to speedruns that can be split up into tenths of a second. I'm not sure the developers of the game had that in mind when making it, but for whatever reason, so many of them have the gameplay and the structure lends itself so well to speedrunning. And that's something I picked up on through watching your videos too. So I wouldn't blame you if you just stuck with, if you just stuck with NES, because it's fascinating to watch.
There's a lot of stories to tell. NES, obviously, there's so many topics I haven't even covered on the system yet. There's a lot more I can get into, but some of the more popular runs have been even past the NES, like Super Metroid. Especially years ago. I mean, the competition in Super Metroid for speedrunning, that was probably one of the top 3 games at one point. Mario 64 has always been pretty high up there, Ocarina of Time. So, in general, simplistic games tend to lend themselves well to speedrunning just because you can really try to hone in and master the simple little mechanics that you have rather than having to master everything in a Call of Duty game or something like that. Although there are Call of Duty speedruns, so it's not like that's, exclusive to NES games. But yeah, it's really, really good for speedrunning, no doubt.
Yeah, and it seems to me like, for your own sanity, some games that with some shorter speedruns seem like something you'd want to gravitate to in terms of just doing the research. So it makes sense that, a lot of these shorter NES style games end up in a speedrunner you might be aware of. We interviewed here on the show a few weeks back, White Hat 94, and he has tons of speedrun acumen in the NES stuff. But to get away from that for a second, I wanted to kind of point out that, you're really well researched. That's hard to say. You're really well researched. And it seems like from a casual perspective that you just have your finger on the pulse of speedrun progressions. Like you just know all of these things. Like you have, the single stage from the original Mario all the way to, what you said, Wii Sports Resort Golf. Do people recommend these interesting narratives to you, or are these things that you're just generally aware of having your finger on the pulse of speedruns?
Well, I would say in general, I'm probably a little more knowledgeable on speedrunning events and new records than like the average speedrunner, but there's definitely more people that know a lot more than me. And, I cover a pretty wide variety of topics in my videos, but the stuff that I don't cover, like I've never done a Celeste video, I've never done, other popular modern games like Mario Odyssey or any Zelda game. There's a lot of stuff I don't cover because I simply do not know anything about it. So, like Wii Sports Resort Golf, The only reason I really even considered that was because I'm a pretty big Darbian fan. He's like the former Super Mario Bros. Record holder, and he streams on Twitch pretty often. And he did Wii golf runs, I guess it was about 2 or 3 years ago now, on his channel, and it got really popular. And I remember watching him do it for a few weeks, and it just kind of stuck in the back of my mind for the next couple years until a long time later. I thought, I think that history of that game kept going after Derby, and maybe that could be a good video. So, I'd say I'm relatively up to date on new developments in speedrunning, but it's not like I'm like, okay, I know this game had a record 2 months ago. I got to make sure I cover that, and then that game had a record a month ago. Got to do that next. It's just the stuff that I happen to know and follow pretty well.
So you say that Darbian is one of your favorite speedrunners. That brings me to a question that I think a lot of people have, is that one nice thing about your channel is that you kind of stay out of the way. And it's all about the game, it's all about the speedrunner, and it's all about content. I don't think too many people know about you, and what some of your favorite games are, and who some of your favorite people to watch are. If you had to pick a few people and pick a few games, what would those be?
Well, in terms of people to watch, I will say that when I first got into speedrunning, there was kind of a trifecta of these 3 runners that I can really credit for getting me interested in it, because I used to watch, this was probably like 2014, late 2013. I'd watch them stream on Twitch whenever they came on, and it was Andrew G, Super Mario Bros. Speedrunner, Sinister One, he's a Mike Tyson's Punch-Out speedrunner, and Mitch Flower Power, who he's a Mario 3 runner, but he also does like Mario Maker. He kind of does Mega Man games every now and then. So those 3 runners I probably credit for getting me into this more than anyone else. But, in terms of people I watch now, I'm a Mike Tyson's Punch-Out speedrunner, so anyone running that game I will watch. There's a bunch of Mario runners that I watch. Metroid, Castlevania, Ninja Gaiden. I don't want to name too many people in particular, just because I could go on for like dozens and dozens of different people. But typically it's, classic games, Mario Kart games, stuff like that.
Gotcha. One name that has popped up, though, speaking of names, and he's popped up in a couple of your recent videos, and maybe in some of the earlier ones that I didn't catch, but I've kind of caught on to it lately, and that's Matt Turk, a guy who seemed to be speedrunning before a lot of others, and SNES Drunk and I were talking about this before we started recording, and we were like, he's like the Babe Ruth of speedrunning. Like, he existed and set a bunch of records before the competition really drove optimization, which is kind of impressive. But in your eyes, how impressive is someone like Matt Turk, and what does he sort of mean to speedrunning?
Yeah, I got a lot of Matt Turk stories to tell, because he's really an enigma. I mean, we know a bit about him, but he was speedrunning like in the early 2000s. Punch-Out speedrunner, Contra speedrunner, and Super Mario Bros. Those were his 3 kind of main games that he held records in. I'm a Punch-Out runner. I have been ever since I really got into speedrunning, and in our community, he was just always this legend, because he was done speedrunning pretty much by 2010. And speedrunning 10 years ago, back in 2010, was just a fraction of what the size it is now, like maybe a 20th of the size. And so right when speedrunning kind of started to get mainstream, he ducked out, and he hasn't really done any running in 9 or 10 years at least. So he was just always this legend in our community that not that many people knew about, because he was so long ago. He didn't provide that many videos, but we knew that his skill was just ridiculous. And finally I was making these videos starting in 2017, and I decided, okay, so I'm a Punch-Out runner. We know how awesome this guy was. I should probably make sure more people know about him. So I decided to make the Quest to Beat Matt Turk. Talked about everything there. Everyone now knows what he did. And what's funny is I actually had no idea that he did stuff in Contra until I started researching for that video.
Wow.
I was under the impression that this guy named T-Mont was the first record holder in Contra. And that there's like an unused intro for the video. The first 5 or 6 minutes I edited where I talked about Timon as the record holder. And I was doing a little research online at the time, and I discovered a submission by Matt Turk on Twin Galaxies, which was an old speedrunning website. And he had what seemed to be a faster run than Timon's from around the time. And I had his email address because I had emailed him for the first Matt Turk video. So I sent him an email, said, hey, not really sure, but is this like a legitimate thing? Did you actually have the Contra record? And he's a very, very verbose individual. I mean, I sent him like 3 sentences and he replied with about 5 or 6 paragraphs. But nice. Long story short, the answer was yes. He had the Contra record before Timon's, and his time was a lot faster than his. And he still had the video of it, which is a rarity for Matt Turk. He does not normally keep videos. So I had to just scrap the intro. I had to re-edit the first 6 or 7 minutes. So that was like a fun week. And he sent over, nobody had ever seen this Matt Turk VHS before. He put it in his TV, pressed play, and recorded it on his phone, and then uploaded that and sent it to me. So in the video, you're seeing the downloaded recording of a recording from 2005. So, Matt, he's just incredible. He had the Contra record. He almost came back to beat it again years later. He set all these different records in Punch-Out, most of them without a video, but pretty much without exception, most people in the community think he's legitimate. And he also had the tied Super Mario Bros. Record at one point many years ago.
Yeah, regarding Punch-Out, I think that you pointed out in the Matt Turk video that like the reason people think he's legit is because he put his verboseness to use by typing up all these different tips and like, okay, here's how I did this. And it's like, oh my God, right. Like this guy is like super detail oriented. Like, of course this guy's legit. How could he not be if he's got all this knowledge?
I mean, it's theoretically possible. He could have just understood the game really well. He could have done like tool assisted speed running or used an emulator and save states just to make sure that he knew what he was talking about. But we have seen some video from him. We recently uncovered a 2:23 Mike Tyson fight, which would have been world record by like dozens of seconds from when he got it. So that's uploaded on my alternate YouTube account. And, having talked with the guy and having seen what I have seen from him, there's very little doubt in my mind that he's legitimate. But, there's always the possibility that he might not be because there's not many videos, but I'm pretty sure that he's 100% legit.
The moment in the Contra video where and this brings me kind of to my next point where you're leading up to introduce who has the record, and you say, and his name of course is Matt Turk, and it's like this dramatic moment, and you have a real knack for building suspense in these videos. And I'm wondering if you have like any sort of influence from watching other YouTubers or from watching like TV shows or movies or something like that, because it really adds a ton to your videos, the way they're structured to like, and you don't always lead to the obvious conclusion like, well, of course he's gonna get it. It's like I want to say like 30% of the time you're like, and he failed, which always makes me laugh. Right. But it's to kind of keep the viewer off balance. But do you have any influences? Like what was the tipping point for what made you want to start doing stuff like that?
I don't. If I was to name like one person who's probably had the most influence on my video making style, it would probably be this guy named John Boyes.
Not sure if you've heard of him, he was SB Nation for a long time, and now
SB Nation, it's secret based. They changed it recently, and but
I know exactly what you're talking about.
He makes sports videos, and I'm a pretty big sports fan, and I think I started watching him right around the time I started making YouTube videos and uploading them. So, I don't think it's not like I watched him and then I decided, oh man, I want to try doing this, and I did it myself. But since I started watching him around the time I started making YouTube videos, I think a lot of his style kind of rubbed off on me, and we just have, I think we have similar ways of building tension. It's kind of similar ways of telling stories. I think there's a lot of overlap between the two of us.
if there's any sports fans listening to this, John Boyce did a video about the Seattle Mariners that is, even if you're not a Mariners fan, even if you're not a baseball fan, it is incredible to watch. And it's mostly because of what you say, because of how he structures it. And it's just heartbreaking. Yeah. Like the losses they have, and he really knows what he's doing. That guy is super talented. So you couldn't have had a better influence, I guess, in my opinion.
No, yeah, I have to agree. I mean, he's, as far as I'm concerned, he makes videos about as interesting as they can get. I mean, he takes every piece of drama you can extract from a story, and he knows how to amplify it in a video form. Right. It's pretty impressive. Yeah, and that's a good point. When I've described your stuff to people, when I'm like, have you ever heard of summoning salt? And they're like, no, I have no idea what that is. And I'm like, it's like ESPN 30 for 30, but for speedrunning. And a lot of people are still like, But once they check it out, they get the feel for it. They get the ramp up in excitement, the ramp up in suspense. And you do a really good job of making all of that content easy to get interested in for people that are not particularly interested in speedrunning or video games in general. My wife is a good example of this. She doesn't so much care about all of the video games that I hoard and love. She certainly, speedrunning is just an extra layer of that, where she just doesn't understand why that's an awesome thing that I think is great. But she will sit down and take in one of your videos because it's so well structured and it's just easy to access for everyone. Is that something that you're consciously thinking about when you're making your videos? You're thinking about the audience as, okay, they're not going to know what a spread rhythm is in Contra. They might not know the history of Contra at all. And you always do a good job of leading everyone in so that by the end, everyone kind of feels like an expert in this game. Yeah, it's a tough balance to strike. If I'm explaining how Super Mario Bros. Speedrunning works, I need to find the balance between not saying stuff like, when you're playing Mario, you press the A button to jump and you can hit coins and collect them. But I don't want to just go start rambling off and then if you do this precise sequence of inputs, you can hit the flagpole glitch, save a frame rule, move on to 4-2 and climb up the vine and do the drop glitch and the wrong warp. And it's, there's a pretty precise line you have to walk between overly explaining and not explaining enough. And it is something I definitely always have in mind and I'm being conscious of when I'm making these videos. So it can get tricky, but I try my best to make it, make it interesting to people who don't know about it, but still not overly complicated to the point that it's gonna confuse people. Right, you're almost like an instructor at that point, where you're teaching. It's almost like you're teaching a class, so to speak, where you want to make sure people understand, but you don't want to put them to sleep either. Yeah, honestly, I think that it's possible to make practically any story interesting if you tell it the right way. If you know how to build drama and tension. And there's a lot of these speedrunning stories that on their surface aren't necessarily that interesting. So I just have to figure out the right way to tell them and the right way to, talk about every angle in the best way I can to make it interesting. So what would you say is the craziest speedrunning story? I confess I haven't seen all your videos, but Arcus continuing to get a 140/40, or what was it, 140 exactly? 1140. 1140. Yeah. Oh my god. It's what are the odds of that? I'll say this. I think the next video I'm making, I'm not going to disclose what it is here. I think the next video I'm making might have my personal favorite story of any video that I've made yet. So be on the lookout for that. But as far as ones that I've already done, I don't know if you remember in Ninja Gaiden, there was a guy named Ohan, yes, who was right before Arcus, and he blew everyone out of the water because he posted this 1148 that was he was 10 seconds ahead of his emulator run or something like that, and people weren't even sure if that was real. So then he's like, okay, I'll do it on console and I'll beat it by 10 seconds. And then that record stood for years. And then Arcus comes along and beats it, and then he gets, like you said, 3 1140s in a row, and then finally gets his time that he needs, 1139. And so that's Ninja Gaiden, I think, has one of the best stories. Super Mario. The original Super Mario Bros. There's like 10 or 15 or dozens of little stories you could tell that are really interesting. Like Andrew G's redemption arc in that game. He ran the game and was record holder for years and years and years, and then Blubbler and Derby and Cosmic beat his record, and then he came back in I think 2016 or 2017 and got really, really close, and then unfortunately choked in the second to last room and messed up his swimming inputs, and he just barely missed the record, and he was just never quite able to reclaim it. But there's tons of little stories like that in Super Mario Bros. That I think are really interesting. So
yeah, it's all fascinating to me. I'm excited now. I'm more excited than I was already for the next thing you got coming out. And
yeah, it's going to be fun.
And there's just one thing I wanted to sort of reminisce on because I loved it so much, and it's not really a question, but I just wanted to say there's a point, and we're kind of spoiling some of your videos, but they've been out for months. People should watch them. But there is a point in the Wii Sports Golf one where there is this, typical dramatic lead up, and I'm like, all right, what's going on? And you're like, and that's until Tyler got a capture card. That was like my favorite part of that whole video because it was just so good. Didn't see that coming.
Yeah, with Wii Sports Golf, I mean, I still wanted people to take it seriously, but I knew it was kind of like not like a joke topic, but it wasn't like an ultra serious like Mario 64 battle where it's a really competitive record, and it's still competitive, but it's different. It's Wii Golf. It's not quite on the same level. So I kind of tried to be add like little small inside jokes or dry humor whenever I could in that video, just to mix it up a bit and make it a little more interesting. And I wasn't really trying to go over the top with it or anything, but people really responded positively to it. So yeah, that was fun to make.
I really liked it because it's not something I would have ever guessed had speedrunners in it, and there were a lot of popular ones in there, Darbian being one of them. And I think for me too, it's not all button inputs. They're doing a lot of it with physical motion that I think is something that is even more fascinating to me, that they're able to do that, 100% accurate every time they go through it. It's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, the top level runners in that game have, I think, tens of thousands of runs. I think Tyler had something like over 20,000 runs, and I think some of them might have been him accidentally starting the timer, so it wasn't actually that many. But I mean, I know he's done a ridiculous amount of practice to get that good, so it's pretty insane.
The wind is randomized completely in that game, isn't it?
It's it cycles in a way that you can't predict, but you know that you can't get the same wind value twice in a specific period of time. So you can kind of rule certain things out, but in general, it is fairly random.
Because there's that par 3 towards the end that's like over 200 yards. You have to use I don't know if it's a driver or 3-wood, and it's the hardest hole for me. It's always the hardest hole for me to play. And it's like,
I think I know the one you're referring to, and I think one of the strategies they actually did was doing a give up where they just hit it into the water over and over, and it's just about as fast as getting I think almost as fast as a birdie. It's faster than a par.
Because you got to get it to stop on the green, and it doesn't, and
it's
I hate that hole.
It's good.
Cool. So before we have some listener questions here, just a couple, but before we move into that, I wanted to put you on the spot. You can decline to answer if you want to, but if you could make a speedrunning Mount Rushmore, who would you put there?
Ooh, boy. This is going to vary for everyone pretty much every speedrunner who you ask that question, because, I'm going to be biased because people who got me into speedrunning, it was like Andrew G. He set so many records. Maybe someone like Mike Uyama, who was one of the founders of Games Done Quick and did a ton for that community. I think Andrew G and Mike Uyama are two fairly universal picks, but beyond that, it's like I'd have to think about it a little more to give you a better answer. But
just two Matt Turks.
Those are my two like default go-to picks. Yeah.
Fair enough. Appreciate you at least giving me a couple there. That was good. So
it would be two Matt Turks, and then like the rest would just be like nothing but Matt Turk like emails Just paragraph after paragraph, like chiseled into the mountain by Matt Turk himself.
Matt Turk, I mean, the only thing with Matt Turk is I really wish that he did more games, because he really kind of, whenever he picked up a game, he tended to really, really focus in on it and pretty much exclusively do attempts of that one game. So he doesn't have like a super wide variety of runs that he's completed. But if he had records like in Contra for like a dozen different NES games, then I would definitely be inclined to put him on the speedrunning Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, good point.
And speaking of him, just a little bit more before we move on, you're saying that like he's not involved in the community really at all. He's not speedrunning anything. He's kind of on the outside these days.
No, yeah, to my knowledge, I think the last thing that I know he did in speedrunning, and I think I talked about this a little bit in my Punch-Out Quest to Beat Matt Turk video, was Sinister One beat his Mr. Sandman record in Punch-Out. So Matt Turk actually came back, beat Sinister One's record, and I think that was 2011, and I believe since then, that's the last thing he's done in speedrunning.
Wow.
So I think it's been 9 years now, and I don't know that for a fact, but to my knowledge, that was the last thing that he did.
Interesting. What an interesting guy.
If anyone would know, it'd be you, I guess. So
yeah, there's one known picture of him online too.
Wow.
If you're curious, you could look up Matt Turk Punch-Out, and there's a picture of him standing next to Mike Tyson having a book that he co-authored signed. So,
holy cow.
That's so interesting. He's
pretty
so
neat.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, he really is.
All right, some listener questions. We have one pretty good one and one that's kind of goofy, and I'm excited for both. So the first one here comes from Raphael. He says, is there any design convention in retro games that annoys you specifically? For example, taking damage or insta-kill by just touching the bosses, even when they are not attacking, getting shot off screen, etc.
Well, that depends if you mean just for casually playing or for speedrunning. So I guess I could kind of try to answer both.
Sure.
I mean, casual playing, it's just they tried to make them as frustrating as possible, and I think that was by design so that you'd have a nice long game to try to complete. But, downfall of that was that in Ninja Gaiden, you would have a dozen birds on a screen and 6-2 flying into you, so that it would be impossible to beat unless you knew exactly how to do it. Or Castlevania, where a bat will run into your foot and it'll cause you to be knocked back down a cliff just because a bat hit your foot. So stuff like that, where it's difficult in a frustrating way that makes you want to keep playing and not have to stop it to do something else because it's going to take you so long to beat it.
Yeah.
But on the speedrunning front, and this isn't really something that they necessarily did on purpose, the developers, but NES games, at least some of the ones I run, are known for being very, very random. And I think that was just so that you'd never have the same exact experience twice. But I mean, my God, in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, there's some records where even if you do everything correctly, the odds in beating the world record are literally over 1 in 1,000. Or in some cases, like Don Flamenco 2, it's like almost 1 in 10,000 if you do everything right. So it doesn't necessarily make it worse for speedrunning, but to the wrong type of person, I guess it can make it worse because you're doing everything right and the game just says, nope, you didn't get a random star on this guy. Sorry, you're out of luck. So I could see that being really frustrating.
Right on. You touched on mine there briefly. I think my biggest annoyance is the knockback in games. Castlevania comes to mind, but oh man, just in you can't move for a second. You're flashing. You look helpless. Your sprite looks stupid. Like, it just makes me so mad.
Mm-hmm. Zelda 2 is what comes to mind there. The knockback in that game is so bad. I think the emailer for me touched on it. It's getting shot from off screen. That will always make me mad because I have no idea what killed me or what's doing damage to me. I remember, what was the crappy game I played that had the awesome soundtrack? I think it was called Metal Morph. And you're just running around, typical platforming stuff with this creepy music. And there's just these tiny little, 2x2 pixel projectiles flying at you from God knows where. And it's just like, what is this game? Like, did they not like test this game or something? And yeah, it just drives me insane, that kind of stuff.
Classic NES. I mean, there's so many games where it's like the little frustrating things that could just set you over the edge.
Oh, that game is actually SNES. They didn't get it right by then.
Okay,
yeah, it's even worse then. It's even a more egregious crime.
Yeah.
They found more ways to put annoying things on screen by then, but never fixed why it was annoying. Yeah.
Yes, of course. So then our next question is from Michael, and he asks, would you rather fight one T-Rex sized duck or 100 duck-sized T-Rexes?
I mean, I feel like how much harm can a duck do to you, even if it's huge? I guess it can like step on you, but T-Rexes, if they gang up on you, they're gonna bite you. I think they're known for having like sharp teeth and mouths, and I guess a duck would too. But
yep,
I feel like they're both gonna be losing battles. But if I had to pick, probably the duck would be a less sharp, painful death.
Yeah, I think the duck would be at least a chill hangout for a little while till it got mad or thought you were food or something. Whereas the T-Rexes, they're not chill. They're
just gonna attack.
Yeah, they want meat. They want human flesh. They're always hungry and crazy, or at least that's what the movies tell me. So
yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we're in full agreement. I feel like I could trick or outrun a giant duck. There's no getting away from 100 duck-sized T-Rexes. It's just not going to happen.
How are you going to trick the duck?
No
what are you going to like take a loaf of bread and throw it across the street or something?
Yeah, throw a loaf of bread east, run west. That was my plan. That was my entire plan. Yeah,
genius.
All right, well that does it for the interview. I want to thank you again for finding that tweet, which I guess wasn't completely up to you, but I'm so happy that worked out. So thanks for joining us. And where all can listeners find you and your stuff online, and how can they support what you do?
Well, I make YouTube videos under the channel Summoning Salt, so you can just type that in and subscribe to me there if you're interested. I also stream on Twitch. I do world record attempts in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, which ridiculously random and frustrating game, but pretty fun to speed run. So you can check me out, twitch.tv/summoning salt.
Cool. All right
on, man. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us. We really appreciate it. And man, your videos are really they're really hitting on something that nobody else is doing, and I think that's why you've got as many views as you do, because you're filling a niche that needed to be filled, clearly. So keep on doing what you're doing, man, because it's great.
Yeah, it kind of that's kind of how it all got started. It was me just realizing this could be a good idea. I don't think anybody's done it before. Let me just try doing it. And I think it's tough to kind of consistently make these unless you really have the time and the drive to do it. So I'm glad I've been able to keep it up. Right. Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
All right, everyone, that has been another Drunk Friend podcast. As always, you can reach out to us with questions or comments at drunkfriendpodcast@gmail.com. We might even read those out here on the show. If you want to hear more podcasts from our crew, including a new one that's coming out about alcohol, check out polykill.com and poke around.
And if you got nothing to say in an email, no worries. You can still contribute to the podcast by rating and reviewing it wherever you listen. It helps us out a lot, and it only takes a second.
You can find us on social media. On Twitter, I'm at TravPlaysGames. Alex is, of course, at SNESDrunk, and you can find Summoning Salt at Summoning Salt.
Imagine that. The music you heard at the beginning and right here at the end was composed by our friend Coolor. The theme song is called Electric Star Bounce, and you can find a link to more of his music on the Buzzsprout podcast page. And if our logo has you thirsty, you can thank Josh Leslie for that.
That's right. And if you'd like to have that logo on a t-shirt or a coffee cup or something like that, you can go to polykill.com and find that there. Be sure to catch us all on YouTube, and thanks for listening.
And we hope you have a great rest of your day.